Our first community engagement award winner, Dr. Alison Cardinal, is from the School of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences. Dr. Cardinal's scholarly expertise lies at the intersection of language justice, technical communication, and content design. In all of her work, she's committed to language justice approaches in her scholarship, in her community-based work, and in her teaching. Language justice asserts that all people should be able to fully and equitably participate in our communities and access services in their preferred language. Language justice fosters cultural vitality, autonomy, and dignity by allowing people to communicate without being stigmatized. Dr. Cardinal's work seeks to develop and practice ways of decentering English as the default way of speaking and communicating in our institutions to work towards equity for multilingual communities. Dr. Cardinal's approach to language justice comes from a technical communication angle. Drawing on approaches from UX, user experience, her work uses a human-centered design approach to create and share knowledge in both scholarly and community spaces. One of Dr. Cardinal's main areas of expertise is in research methods, especially approaches that use participatory research methods. Through these types of approaches, researchers collaborate with research participants to create knowledge and work together to collect and share what they find. Her recent research in this area has focused on the use of participatory video, where participants film their own environments to research multilingual communities and their language and literary practices. Her current major projects focus on language justice through community-engaged partnerships. She's currently the director of Designing Language Access, a cross-institutional and community-based research and consulting group. In collaboration with health professionals, civil servants, nonprofit professionals, and scholars, they are working towards systematically improving language access in the region. And Dr. Cardinal's talk today is entitled Language Justice, Community-Engaged Scholarship for Multilingual Communities.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to get to share my work with you and a new project that I have been working on. So thank you for that very thorough introduction. So I'll cover some of that and share with you some new stuff that I'm doing. That was a very long, you don't need to know anything else more about me. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the tree as sort of a metaphor for the work that I'm doing around language justice. So kind of think about language justice as the roots, and then all the ways that my work has grown out of that in multiple different directions. So Designing Language Access Group was part of it, and then I'm going to talk about how I've gone into AIDS and HIV clinical research as my new direction. So first, I think it's important to sort of establish what is language access and what is language justice. So when we think about language access, we can talk about it as providing limited English proficient people with reasonable access to the same services as English-speaking individuals. And I use the term limited English proficient very carefully because it does frame these communities as deficient. The challenge is that it is sort of what's used legally as categorizing folks as a protected class of people. So we've used it very strategically in our work with the federal government. So I just want to acknowledge that up front. So that's language access. So part of language access is a regulatory framework. So in Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, it states that it prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin. And language is part of that, that the Supreme Court ruled. And it was further strengthened through Executive Order 13166 in the year 2000 that says that federal agencies need to develop and implement a system to provide those services so LEP persons can have meaningful access to them. So it tries to systematize this approach. So the question is, if we have language access already, why do we need language justice as a framework? So language justice, it helps engaging with multilingual populations, requires a proactive, comprehensive framework for doing this work, and it offers a philosophical and practical grounding for transforming how researchers work with multilingual communities. So just to give you an idea of what's the relationship between language access and language justice, I see language access as sort of those fundamental practical practices like translation, interpretation, and community engagement. and it's nested within language justice, which has a much broader social justice understanding of the role of language in communities having agency and empowerment in the US and globally. And it also acknowledges that language discrimination is a huge contributor to systemic discrimination for a lot of communities. So it places it in that much larger context of social justice. So when I'm doing this work and collaborating with community, we really want to think about moving away from minimal access, especially when we're working with federal agencies, like doing clinical research, to language justice. So minimal access in a federally funded program might be checking the box on a requirement. Okay, we did a translation check, we can move on. Provides language services only when asked. And English is the assumed norm. So people who are English speakers are centered. Language justice, in contrast, it's social justice oriented. It recognizes that work around language is something that contributes to rectifying the injustices in our society. It requires proactive engagement with multilingual communities. You go to them. How do you want to be communicated with? What are the channels of communication? What do we need to do better? And then linguistic diversity is the assumed norm. So people don't have to approach help. You actually have something there and assumed that someone, even if they speak English, for instance, they might be more comfortable in Spanish. It's not just necessarily about like immediate need. So I started this journey, Emma and I and Laura Gonzalez, we got some funding from the Office of Community Partnerships, thank you so much, to begin this very ambitious project, Designing Language Access. And it's a cross-institutional and community-based research and consulting group that we're working to improve language access in the Puget Sound. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time talking about this because I'm gonna pivot to talking about my other project, but I'm just super humbled by all of the people who contributed to this work. A lot of the issues around language access is not my own lived experience or lived experience in the community that I came from. So so many folks from the state, the city, nonprofits, from multiple groups, different scholars in a lot of diverse fields contributed to this. So much, thanks and gratitude for these folks and contributing their expertise to this project. I'm happy to talk more about the things that we did together if you want to after this is over. Okay, so I'm going to talk more specifically about the Language Access and Justice Initiative that I'm currently the PI for through the Vaccine Trial Network. So I'm working with Pedro Goencochea, Rafael Gonzalez, and Michelle Andrasic, who are at Fred Hutch. And Pedro especially, he found the website that I had created for designing language access and just reached out to me, and then we met up, and he's like, I want to do more language justice stuff related to HIV vaccine trial stuff. Are you interested in collaborating with me? And I said yes, and he is just amazing. PrEP wouldn't exist without the work that he did in Peru. So doing clinical research there. So it's been really humbling and wonderful to get to work with these rock stars in this area. So the main problem we are looking at in terms of clinical research trials, Hispanic populations are underrepresented in all clinical research, and particular in HIV/AIDS research, where Hispanics make up 30% of new cases, but only make up 12% of study participants. And this is a huge problem for the validity of the research, and for also making sure whatever research you're doing is engaging in these communities. They benefit from these researchers, from this research, so it's vital that we increase this participation. And we theorize that a lack of language access for these individuals, for monolingual Spanish speakers, is a major barrier to study participation. And there are research in the medical literature that bears this out. So that's why we became really passionate about this as an initiative. So we're partnering with the HVTN, and HVTN stands for the HIV Vaccine Trial Network, and it's an international collaboration of scientists, clinical trial sites, and community representatives working with governments and industry in the global search for an HIV vaccine, with a goal of speeding the development and testing of HIV vaccine candidates. So 2000 to the present, here's all the different sites. Over 70 trials open. There's 100 clinical sites around the globe, and there's 49 current, and over 45,000 people have been enrolled in these. So the work that we're doing is going to have a global impact on every continent but Antarctica. So they're not doing that there. Okay. So what does the HVTN do? It conducts clinical trials designed to answer questions around safety, immunogenicity, vaccine efficacy, social behavioral sciences, and it all takes place through clinical trials in a network of global sites. So some of the work that we began in summer 2023, we ran several webinars on language justice for the CDC that were highly attended. And then in fall 2023, we ran some bilingual workshops, bilingual language justice workshops at USCHA in Washington, DC, and at the 2023 HVTN conference in Seattle. And those are some of the largest conferences around HIV and vaccines in the world. So that was really rewarding work to be able to do that. And so we had folks who were PIs, people who ran community-based groups come, and we discuss these issues. One of the things we realized, though, is we could make all the recommendations in the world, but if we don't have like a basis of like knowledge and qualitative research for what is actually happening in those sites, it makes it really difficult for us to make really specific recommendations for how to work towards language justice in clinical research. So our current research project, which we got a support from a population health grant to begin this, we want to understand the challenges that staff and clinical researchers face in enrolling monolingual participants in HIV/AIDS, investigate how clinical research sites use and employ language access practices and plans, such as translation and interpretation, to increase enrollment and retention of LAP Latinx people, and evaluate the effectiveness of language access practices currently used in education, recruitment, and retention for research participants in clinical research. So our methodology, which we're doing this spring, we're conducting 55 interviews with principal investigators, staff, and researchers across all regions in the United States. So it's pretty big, it's fun. I'm really excited to see what we're gonna find. And we're presenting our preliminary findings at AIDS 2024 in Munich, which is the largest AIDS conference in the world in July. So I'm really excited about that it's, we're thinking about it as having, an international impact on multiple places that work with multilingual populations. So the future impacts, what we hope that what is coming out of this research, we want to design trainings and modules to improve language access at these sites. We're going to do more collaborating with community groups to increase participation and co-sharing of knowledge. It's a huge problem that you're coming into these communities, you're extracting the data, and then you're not communicating back to them the benefits of what has been produced. Conduct pilot programs to implement new comprehensive strategies. So we're hoping to go collaborate with a research site in San Francisco to run a pilot program related to language justice there. Publications and conferences, take our findings to other multilingual sites, and then also this work is going to be featured in my upcoming manuscript, Language Justice and Communication Design, and I'm gonna co-author a chapter with Pedro and Raphael. So, and I just want to emphasize, thank you, UW, for giving me the cash money because I needed it so bad, and I wouldn't have been able to do this research without all of the institutional support that I've gotten. Ollie mentored me and gave Emma and I that first Faculty Fellows Award, and then from there we got a Strategic Initiative Fund grant, and then IAS gave us some money, and now I got the Population Health Initiative, and I'm also looking for more money, so if anybody has a spare dollar, I will accept it. But this, it really paves the way for the type of work that faculty are doing. So I was able to pay a lot of community partners, was a huge portion of this money to make sure they were equitably compensated. It bought me out of time so that I actually have the time to do this for student, undergraduate researchers. So also using this money to really see this as a reciprocal relationship with the community beyond just thank you so much for doing all this free labor for us, which is often what happens. So really trying to put our money where our mouth is for that. So when I look at this tree again, I'm like, I feel so humbled of all the like hundreds of people who like contributed their knowledge, their time and expertise to the work that I have done, from people who have like come to the workshops and people on Designing Language Access Group and people have been activists for decades. You know, this is not my experience, and just how to do this participatory way to make sure it's like reciprocal and impactful on the community is like so important. And I'm just striving to do better at that every day. So thank you. Okay.